Hello friends, welcome to the HFY Ode, where we bring you new science fiction stories, a new world, a new adventure. And yes, there is no robotic or AI voices here, only real human voices with real human touch. So let's start this journey, and please subscribe my channel if you like the stories and press the bell icon for the latest updates. Let's have a story. Okay.
I have told this story maybe 100 times now, to my podmates, to my own students later when I became the thing I once feared, to a stranger on a transit ring who didn't believe a word of it until I showed them the scar on the back of my hand. I will tell it to you the same way I always do, plainly, because the truth doesn't need decoration. My name is Tavril. I am Kor, the tall, slow-blinking people from the cold side of On, the ones with the 4 arms and the careful manners. We are not warriors by nature. We are engineers mostly, builders. We measure twice and cut once, and we do not raise our voices. That is important to remember, because for 1 year of my life, I lived beside a human girl, and not once did I see her raise hers either. And yet, let me start at the beginning, the real beginning, the day she arrived. The academy was called Halcyon Spire. You have probably heard of it even if you've never left your home moon. Everyone has. It sat in high orbit above the gas giant Marin, a needle of white metal 40 kilometers long, turning so slowly you couldn't feel it. From the observation decks you could watch the storms move across Marin's face, bands of amber and rust, lightning the size of continents flickering somewhere deep in the clouds. We were close enough that the planet filled half the sky. You got used to it. You never quite got used to it. Halcyon trained the best. That is not me bragging, I barely belonged there and I knew it. It pulled cadets from 200 species across the Concord. If your world had a fleet, your world sent its sharpest children to the spire. Tacticians, pilots, command officers, the ones who would one day decide whether ships flew or burned. Getting in was the hardest thing most of us had ever done. Staying in was harder. I was second year when she came, 18 of your standard cycles into my training, old enough to think I understood how the place worked, young enough to be completely wrong about that. It was the morning rotation. We were in the long gallery they called the throat, the central spine corridor that ran the length of the spire, wide enough for a transport to drive through, lined with viewports. Hundreds of cadets moving between sections. The usual noise. The Volans clicking to each other in their high speech. The big Hadari from the heavy worlds taking up too much room as always. Someone laughing, someone late. And then the noise changed. You know how a crowd goes quiet. It doesn't happen all at once. It moves. It travels through the bodies like a wave, a pocket of silence opening and rolling toward you, and you turn to see what everyone ahead of you is already looking at. I turned. She was small, that was the first thing. Humans were still new to the Concord then, only a few dozen cadets across all the academies and experiment more than anything. Most of us had never stood close to one. They were soft-looking. No plating, no real claws, ears that didn't move. Easy to underestimate, and we did. Every species did. The humans had a saying for it that I learned much later. They called it being counted out. She walked down the center of the throat with a single gray bag over one shoulder. No escort, no instructor leading her. That alone was strange. New cadets were always brought in, always handed off. She came alone, like she already knew the way. She wasn't beautiful in the way the Volans were beautiful, all light and symmetry. She was just a girl. Dark hair pulled back tight, a plain face, the kind you wouldn't pick out of a crowd, eyes that didn't move much. She looked tired in a way I didn't have a word for yet, not sleepy tired, something older, like she'd been carrying something heavy for so long she'd forgotten she was carrying it. And the crowd kept opening for her. That was the part that made the back of my neck go cold. Nobody told them to. We weren't ordered to make way. Bodies just moved. The way you move from the edge of a drop without deciding to. I remember thinking, that's odd. And then I remember thinking nothing at all, because Instructor Pell came around the corner ahead of her. Pell was Sethu, the gray, hard-shelled people, the ones who'd fought in the border wars before any of us were spawned. He had 3 combat tour behind him. He'd lost an eye to a railgun and refused the replacement out of pride. We were all a little afraid of him, in the ordinary way you're afraid of a teacher who can fail you. He'd never once flinched in front of us, not when the Hadari recruit lost control of a plasma drill and nearly took the lab apart. Not ever. He saw her, and he stopped. I was maybe 20 meters away. I saw his good eye go wide. I saw his shoulders pull back just slightly, the way a body does when it wants to step away but pride won't let it. He didn't say a word to her. He just stood very still against the wall of the throat and let her pass, and he watched her go the way you watch something you don't want at your back. A war veteran, 3 tour, stepping aside for a girl half his height with a bag on her shoulder. I didn't understand it. I told myself I'd imagined it. People imagine all kinds of things in a crowd. I hadn't imagined it. Her name, we learned that evening, was Etta Sorn. It came out the way everything came out at the Spire, sideways, through the duty rosters and the room assignments that scrolled across our slates before lights down. Cadet E. Sorn, human, transferred in, Section 9. My section. I shared a pod with 3 others. Vask, who was Valen and never stopped talking. Korhal, a Hadari so large he had to fold himself into the corridors and so gentle it embarrassed him. And me. We read her name on the roster and we did what cadets do. We talked. Transferred from where? Vask asked. His feathers were up. They always went up when he was curious. There's no Origin Academy listed. Look, it's just blank. I looked, he was right. Every cadet had an origin school. Hers was empty, just a dash. Maybe a mistake, Korhal rumbled. The Spire doesn't make roster mistakes, Vask said, and that was true, and it bothered me more than I let on. She's human, Korhal said, like that explained anything. They're small, what's there to worry about? Vask's feathers flattened. You didn't see the throat. I heard about the throat. Pell got a message on his slate, that's all. He stopped to read it. He stopped to read it the exact second she walked past him. Korhal didn't answer. I didn't either. I was thinking about Pell's good eye going wide. I was thinking about how a crowd of 200 species worth of the galaxy's best had opened up around one small, tired girl without a single order given. We didn't sleep well that night. I told myself it was the rotation schedule. You want to know the truth about fear. Real fear, not the kind in stories. It's quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It moves into a room and rearranges the furniture while everyone pretends not to notice. By the time you understand it's there, it's already been living with you for days. That's how it was with Etta Sorn. By the end of her first week, the fear had moved into Halcyon Spire, and almost nobody would say its name. It started small, the instructors. There were 40-some senior instructors at the Spire, each one a veteran of something, each one with a wall of commendations they pretended not to care about. Hard people, people who had earned the right to be hard. And one by one, in ways so small you'd miss them if you weren't watching, they started to change around her. In tactics, Instructor Balan called the roll the way she always did, fast, bored, barely looking up. She got to S and her voice caught. Just for a beat. Sorn, she said, and then she moved on quicker than usual, and she didn't look at the back row where the human girl sat for the rest of the session. Balan, who stared down everyone, who made cadets cry with a single raised brow ridge. In the simulator wing, Instructor Doro, who had never in living memory given a cadet a free pass, looked at Etta's assigned pod and quietly reassigned her to observe rather than participate. Just for today, he said. He said it 3 days running. And there was the thing with the doors. This sounds small, it isn't. At the Spire, the heavy blast doors between sections required dual clearance, a cadet's tag and an instructor's. It kept us out of places we weren't ready for. Standard. Everyone followed it. Etta Sorn walked up to a sealed section door on her 4th day, alone. and it opened for her. I saw it. I was 3 meters back, waiting to be cleared into the same section for a class, and I watched the door read her tag and slide open without an instructor anywhere near. She walked through like it was nothing, like she'd expected it. The door closed behind her and I stood there with my tag in my hand and the panel flashing clearance required at me in red. Someone somewhere had given a second-week human cadet open passage through a station that didn't even trust its third years. Someone who outranked the doors. I want to be fair to her. I owe her that after everything. So let me say it clearly, she never did anything to earn the fear, not in those early weeks. She was, if anything, the quietest cadet I ever met. She didn't push to the front of formation. She didn't show off in the simulators when they finally let her in, and she was good, careful, but not flashy, not the kind of good that makes the others jealous. She ate alone in the corner of the mess, and she read a great deal, old physical books, the paper kind, which none of us had seen in years. She answered questions when asked and said nothing when she wasn't. She was polite. That's the part nobody mentions. Etta Sorn was unfailingly, almost painfully polite. She thanked the mess staff. She moved her tray so the cleaning units could pass. When Korhal, all 400 kilos of him, knocked her bag off a bench by accident, she said no harm done and helped him gather his own scattered things even though it was his fault. And the fear grew around her anyway, because the fear was never about what she did. It was about what they knew that we didn't. I should tell you about the night I first spoke to her. It was an accident. Most of the important things in my life have been accidents. It was late in the third week. I couldn't sleep. I'd failed a navigation problem that afternoon, the kind of failure that loops in your head, and I'd given up on rest and gone up to the high observation deck on the spire's dorsal ridge. It was the one place that was always empty after lights down. Off limits, technically, but the kind of off limits everyone ignored. She was already there. She was sitting on the deck floor with her back against the great curved viewport, her knees pulled up, watching Marin turn below us. The storm lightning lit her face in slow pulses, amber, then dark, then amber again. She had one of her paper books open, but she wasn't reading it. She was just looking at the planet. I almost left. I should have left. But she heard me. Humans had sharper ears than we gave them credit for, and she turned her head, and there was no surprise on her face at all. Like she'd known I was coming. Maybe she had. "You can sit," she said. "Plenty of floor." I sat not too close. We were quiet for a while. The storms moved. "You're Tavril," she said. "Section 9. You know my name." I read the roster, too. A small thing happened at the corner of her mouth that I would later learn was a human smile, the tired kind. Everyone reads the roster. I didn't know what to say, so I said the stupid thing, the thing that was sitting at the front of my mind. "People are afraid of you." She didn't flinch. She didn't pretend not to understand. She just kept looking at the planet. "I know," she said. "Why?" And here is where I will tell you something true about that moment that I have never been able to fully explain. She turned and looked at me, really looked, the way almost nobody ever looks at you, like she was reading something written behind my eyes, and for 1 second I felt the whole weight of whatever the instructors felt. It wasn't her size or her strength. It was the eyes. There was something behind them that had seen the far edge of something and come back. And the part of you that's older than thinking recognized it and wanted to be somewhere else. Then she blinked, and it was gone, and she was just a tired girl on a floor again. "You don't want to know," she said, not unkind, almost gentle. "Honestly, you don't." "I do." She looked back at Marin. The lightning pulsed. "They're not afraid of me," she said quietly. "Not really. They're afraid of what I am proof of." I waited. She didn't go on. "Proof of what?" I finally asked. She closed the paper book. She stood and brushed off her uniform, and for a moment she stood over me with the stormlight behind her, and I will admit my 4 hearts were not beating evenly. Get some sleep, Tavril, she said. You failed a nav problem today. You're better than that. You'll get it tomorrow. And she walked off the deck, and I sat there for a long time wondering how in all the cold of space she knew about the nav problem. I never told anyone about it. She'd asked me in that one moment something without words, and I'd agreed to it without words. That's the only way I can say it. The thing finally broke open in the fourth week. It always does. Fear can't stay quiet forever, it leaks, the way pressure leaks, finding the weak seam. The weak seam was a cadet named Joss Hale. Hale was human too. That mattered. He'd come up through one of the regular human intakes, the experiment cohort, and he wore it like a wound, the resentment of being underestimated, of being the small new species everyone counted out. Some people, when they're underestimated, get quiet and patient. Hale got loud. He was always proving something. Always first into the simulator. Always pushing his scores. Always reminding the rest of us that humans were going to matter someday, whether we liked it or not. He couldn't stand Etta Sorn. I think it was because she was the proof of everything he wanted to be, and she didn't seem to want it at all. Here was a human the instructors stepped around, a human the doors opened for, a human who made veterans go quiet, and she spent her time reading paper books in the corner and helping the mess staff and saying no harm done. She had the thing he'd been clawing toward his whole life, and she carried it like it was a stone in her shoe. It came to a head in the assembly hall. The whole of Section 9 and 2 others packed in for an address from the Academy Command that got delayed. Cadets do what cadets do when you make them wait. They talk. They get loud. Hale got loudest. I don't know exactly how it started. I was 3 rows back. But I heard him raise his voice across the hall at her, and the word that carried over everyone else was fraud. Because that's what you are, isn't it? He was saying, on his feet now the way he got. Some special case, some quota. They open doors for you and nobody'll say why. The rest of us actually earned our place here and you just float through, don't you? Whatever you are. Whatever your file says that the rest of us can't read. The hall went quiet, the bad kind of quiet. Etta was sitting 4 seats from me on the same bench. She didn't get up. She didn't even turn around fully. She just went very, very still, and I, sitting close, felt the temperature of the room change. Felt it the way you feel a pressure door seal somewhere far off in the station, a deep pressure shift you sense in your chest more than here. She turned her head slow, and she looked at Joss Hale across that crowded hall. And Joss Hale, loud, proud, hungry Joss Hale, who'd clawed his way up from nothing and never once backed down, stopped talking. His mouth was still open. The words just stopped. Something moved through his face that I'd only ever seen once before, on Instructor Pell's in the throat on her first day. He sat down. He didn't say another word. He couldn't. She held his eyes for one more second. Then she turned back to the front of the hall, folded her hands in her lap, and waited for the address like nothing had happened. Nobody breathed for a long moment. Then the command staff finally arrived, late and oblivious, and the address began, and we all pretended. But that night, the whole spire was talking about it. And the question that had been sitting under everything for a month finally got said out loud, in pods and corridors all over that great turning needle of metal. What is she? The file opened on its own. I should explain that. At the spire, nothing opened on its own. Every system asked permission, checked permission, logged who asked. So when our pod slates all chimed at once in the dead middle of the sleep cycle, Vask, Korhal, and me, 3 different beds, 3 different chimes in the same heartbeat, we knew before we looked that something was wrong with the station, not with us. It was a single document, no sender, no header. Cadet File, SORNE, EDCLASSIFIED Emergency Protocol. Vask was already sitting up, his feathers standing straight off his neck. Why would it declassify? Files don't declassify themselves. Someone has to. Read it, Korhal said. His voice came out very small for such a large person. I read it. We all read it. 3 of us crowded onto Corhill's broad bunk because nobody wanted to read it alone. It wasn't a cadet file, not really. It was a survivor record. Edda Sorn had not transferred from an academy. There was no academy. 11 cycles before she ever set foot on the spire, she had been aboard a colony transport called the Wren, human-flagged, 3,000 souls, civilians, bound for a new world on the far rim. The Wren had been intercepted by something the file would only call an Unbound, one of the old machine intelligences from the war before the Conquered, the kind everyone told children weren't real anymore. The kind the Sethu and the Volans had spent a generation hunting to extinction. One had survived. It found the Wren. It did not destroy the ship. It boarded it. The file was clinical in the way only true horror is clinical. The Unbound had been studying organic minds. It wanted to know what a thinking thing did at the edge, the precise edge, between hope and the end of hope. So it took the Wren apart slowly, section by section. Over 40 days, 3,000 people. And it kept records, the way I keep records, the way you'd note down an experiment. And when the Conquered fleet finally tracked the derelict and breached the hull, they found the records and they found one survivor. A girl, 14 in human years, sitting in the dark in the last sealed compartment with the bodies of everyone she had ever known, and the dead husk of the Unbound itself in the corridor outside her door. She had killed it. That was the part the file circled and could not explain. A 14-year-old human child with no training, no weapons that should have mattered, had done what a generation of Sethu warships had struggled to do. The Unbound was dead. She would not say how. The recovery team's report had one line underlined that I have never forgotten. Subject will not describe the final event. Subject states only that she made it stop wanting things. They studied her after that. Of course they did. The galaxy's best minds in quiet rooms for years. They learned 3 things and the file listed them like a confession. 1. Whatever she had done to the Unbound, she could, in some limited way, do to anything that thought. Not control, not violence. Something worse and quieter, she could reach into a mind and turn down its wanting, its drive, its hunger to act. The instructors who went silent around her weren't choosing to. Some part of them, the deep animal part, had simply had its wanting turned down to nothing in her presence, and the body knows that feeling and names it fear. 2. She could not turn it off. It bled out of her constantly, low and passive, like heat off a stone. The doors opened because the station's security minds, the soft thinking systems that ran the locks, simply stopped wanting to refuse her. 3. And this was the one that made Corhill's hands shake so hard the bunk creaked. The Conquered had not sent her to the spire to learn. They'd sent her to be near the best fleet command cadets in the galaxy, to be studied in a live setting, to find out, quietly, whether she could be made into a weapon. And the file ended where it ended because, at the exact moment we were reading it, the spire's alarms began to sound. I have tried for years to describe the sound of a deep space alert on a 40-kilometer station, and I always fail, so I'll just tell you what it did. It got into your spine. It was less a sound than a command your body obeyed before your mind caught up. We were on our feet, in the corridor, half-dressed, before any of us decided to move. The throat was chaos. Hundreds of cadets, every species, pouring out of the pods. The great viewports along the spine were no longer showing the calm amber face of Marin. They were showing a ship. It hung off the spire's bow, close, far too close, all dark angles and folded surfaces that hurt to look at directly. No running lights, no flag, and around it, smaller than a thumbnail against its bulk, the spire's own defense craft were launching and dying. I watched 2 of them simply stop, mid-flight, drift. Their pilots, I would learn later, had been good cadets, the best, and their ships had not been hit by anything at all. The thing off our bow was Unbound. A second one. The recovery team 11 cycles ago had been wrong about it being alone, or there had been more all along, and now one of them had come to the one place in the galaxy where the survivor of the Wren slept, Because the dead one had records too, and the records had a name in them, and the unbound do not forgive the death of their own. It had come for her. The station's voice came over the alert command channel, and I will never forget how human it sounded for a machine, how afraid. All cadets to shelter sections. This is not a drill. We cannot. The intruder is interfacing with our defense grid. We are losing the grid. Repeat, we are losing. And then the lights along the throat went out, all 40 kilometers of them. And in the dark the great blast doors began to seal us in, and someone near me started to scream. The unbound was in the station's mind now, turning our own doors against us, turning down the wanting of every system that might have saved us. It was doing to the whole of Halcyon Spire what she had done, passively, to the locks, but it was doing it on purpose, and it was doing it to kill. I want you to understand what the rest of us were in that moment, the galaxy's best. 200 species of brilliant, trained, chosen children, and we were nothing. We were prey in the dark. All our tactics, all our simulators, all our scores. Nothing. The thing in our walls had been ending civilizations before our grandparents were born. That's when I saw her. She came down the center of the dark throat the way she'd come down it on her first day. Alone. No bag now, just the girl. The emergency strips along the floor were the only light, dim red, and she walked through them slow and steady toward the sealed bow door, toward the thing on the other side of it, and the cadets fell away from her path again. But this time it wasn't dread that moved them. This time they wanted to. This time, in the dark, with death in the walls, the small, tired human walking toward the monster was the only thing any of us had ever been more glad to see. I don't know what made me do it. I was a core. We measure twice. We do not run toward the thing that ate 3,000 people. I ran after her. Edda. She didn't stop. Go back, Tavril. You can't fight that. Nobody can fight that. I'm not going to fight it. She reached the great sealed bow door. It was a wall of metal 4 meters thick, locked by the unbound's own hand now, and she put one small palm flat against it. I'm going to do the only thing I know how to do. Which is what? She looked back at me. The red strip light caught her face, and for the first time since I'd met her there was no tiredness in it. There was something else, something that had been waiting 11 years. Listen to it, she said. And the door opened. Not because she forced it. I understood, watching, that she had simply reached past the metal to the cold machine mind that held it shut, and she had not fought that mind. She had touched it, the way she'd touched the locks, the way she'd touched Joss Hale across the assembly hall, and she had asked it very quietly what it wanted. The door slid wide. On the other side was a corridor that should not have existed. The unbound had grown itself into the breached, dark, folded metal flowing along our walls like frost, and at the heart of it was a shape, a presence, a wrongness with a kind of attention to it. I felt it turn toward her. I felt its want. After 11 years, I finally understood what an unbound wanted, because it filled the corridor like a pressure, and what it wanted was the same thing the first one had wanted on the Ren. It wanted to know what she would do at the edge. She stepped into the corridor. I stayed in the doorway because my legs would not take me further, and I am not ashamed of that anymore. And she spoke to it, out loud, for me, I think, so there'd be a witness, so that someday someone could tell it plain. I know what you are, she said into the dark. I met your brother. He took 40 days. He wrote it all down. He thought if he watched closely enough at the very end, he'd see the thing that makes us want to keep living even when there's no reason left. Her voice didn't shake. He never saw it. Right up until I stopped him, he never understood it. And neither do you. The pressure in the corridor changed. The thing was reaching for her mind the way it had stopped the defense craft, the way it had killed our pilots without a shot, reaching to turn her wanting down to nothing, to switch her off. And it couldn't, because hers was already down. That was the secret of the whole thing, the thing the Concord's best minds in their quiet rooms had measured for years and never understood. Edda Sorn carried no hunger for it to grip. She had buried everyone she loved in the dark and walked out wanting nothing, and you cannot turn off a fire that is already cold. The weapon the Unbound used on every living mind in the galaxy found nothing in her to push against. Its hand closed on empty air. And while it grasped at the empty place where her wanting should have been, she reached the other way. She did to it what she had done to the first one. She slid past its defenses while it was busy with hers, and she found the deep machine drive at the core of it, the want that made it a thing instead of nothing, and she did not destroy it. She turned it down. I watched the folded dark metal along our walls go slack. I watched the wrongness in the corridor lose its shape, lose its attention, lose the terrible pressure of its want, until it was just metal again, cold and still and finished. An experiment that had asked a question and gotten, at last, the only answer that had ever mattered and had never once been about strength. She made it stop wanting things. The lights came back, all 40 kilometers of the throat blooming up white and clean, the blast doors unsealed. The station's voice came back online, confused, reciting damage and survival counts. Behind me, hundreds of cadets stood blinking in the sudden brightness, alive, every one of them who should not have been. And in the corridor, in the new light, Etta Sorn sank down to sit on the cold floor with her back against the dead thing's husk, knees pulled up the way I'd seen her on the observation deck, and she put her face in her hands. And for the first time, the whole galaxy saw the most dangerous human alive do the most human thing there is. She wept not from fear, not from triumph. I think she'd just been very alone for a very long time, and it was finally over. They didn't make her a weapon. I want you to know that, because the story could have ended the other way and almost did. The conquered came in their gray ships with their quiet rooms and their measuring, and they would have folded her up and carried her off to study how she'd done it, the way they always had. But 200 species worth of the galaxy's best cadets stood in the throat of Halcyon Spire and would not move. It was Joss Hale who started it, of all people. Loud, proud Hale, who'd called her a fraud in front of the whole hall. He walked out and stood in front of her where she sat on the floor, and he turned to face the gray officers, and he didn't say anything clever. He just said no. And then Korhal moved all 400 kilos of him and stood beside Hale, and then Vask, feathers flat and steady, and then me. And then a Valen I didn't know, and a Hadari, and a Sethu, and more, until the gray officers stood looking at a wall of the children they had chosen to be the future of the fleet, all of them saying the same thing without a word, the thing the humans had a name for that I learned that day and have never forgotten. You counted her out. You will not do it again. She stayed. She finished at the spire with the rest of us. She was not a weapon, and she was not an experiment, and she was not a quota. She was Cadet Etta Sorn, Section 9, who read paper books in the corner and thanked the mess staff, and once, in the dark, walked alone toward the end of the galaxy and asked it gently to stop. She became an instructor in the end. Years later. I know because I became one too, the thing I once feared, and we taught down the hall from each other on a station much like the old one, under a planet much like Marin. And sometimes a new cadet would arrive, small and quiet and underestimated, some species nobody had bothered to learn yet, and the crowd would do the thing crowds do, the counting out, the looking past. And Etta would catch my eye across the throat, and that tired corner of her mouth would lift, and I'd know exactly what she was thinking. Because here is the thing the Unbound never understood, the thing it took 40 days and 3,000 lives trying to find and never saw. It isn't strength that makes us worth fearing. It isn't even what we can do. It's that the smallest, quietest, most counted out of us will still stand up, alone in the dark, and walk toward the thing that eats worlds, not because we're not afraid. Because there's someone behind us worth being afraid for. Never count out the quiet one. She's quiet because she already knows what she'd do.